Welcome to JonBownePolitix number 23. The topic that got my gears grinding this week is the fact that I've been marginalized. I've become a part of the refuse of censorship. There was a time when I would communicate to the American people with a report and average somewhere between 30,000 and possibly 125 to 150,000 views. Sometimes I'd knock it out of the park and get 1 million views, but for the most part, 30,000 to 150,000 views. Well, as you may be aware of, my reports and their reach have been severely censored due to the censorship of InfoWars, shadow banning, and a general distaste for anything truthful. So it got me to thinking about how every once in a while, something jars the average American out of the monotony of the 9-to-5 doldrums, whereupon, surrounded by the madness of the direction of all that was held sacred, one can't help but question what is behind the debasement, the redirection of what appeared to be a natural progression of American culture. In fact, it's far easier to just say to yourself that it's all on its own inevitable course and blissfully sink into a movie or a football game to turn it all off. I do it too. There's nothing to be ashamed of, more or less. However, it's not a rare event that this spark of clarity is ignited amongst my fellow citizens every day. This moment of clarity triggered by some raw truth brought to the surface by maybe a song or a talk show host or a book, or by simply wondering why everything is operating in total and utter chaos as our national identity transforms into a fear-driven, hideous beast sinking its teeth into our waking reality. For me, it was music that woke me up. The state of American music's decline gradually woke me up and sent me down the rabbit hole in an obsessive search to find out where the creative spigot born of the evolution of free human expression had been turned off. As if this free expression was an eagle with a broken wing trapped in a well in some remote rural countryside. I just couldn't narrow it down, and it led me to some strange territory. But that was 12 years ago, and more on what I found later. Sticking to the topic of American music, to this day, the decline of American music explains a lot and serves as a metaphor about where we are as a country and a society. This gradual silent event acts as a touchstone to a far greater malice facing our political and structural landscape as a nation, or more appropriately, a republic. The state of our current republic can be simplified to that of a corrupt casino. On the surface, invested interests build casinos, allowing the gambler to freely come and go as they please. These gamblers utilize skill and luck to determine their outcome against all odds of what should be a system where nothing is rigged out of necessity to strengthen the system by the sheer numbers of people utilizing it. And as the gambler hones their game, their demands as a customer are met and refined. And ultimately, how you play the game garners returns back to the house, i.e. the republic. There will always be winners and losers. That's just how the universe works. However, our corporatized government officials, like those corrupt casino operators, have only their interests and those of their bosses in mind. Bosses that exist in a foreign country with zero respect for the rules, the gamblers, or their skills. These bosses are only concerned with controlling the gambler's constant loss margin while fattening their bottom end. So games are fixed, gamblers are constantly monitored, and those lucky enough and smart enough to win are eventually booted out of the casino. That skillful, lucky gambler is a lot like the now hidden American musicians of 2019. No longer allowed to operate on the winning floor within the confines of the music industry. Like the lucky gambler, these American musicians were too successful, too influential, and they were a direct threat to the casino operators, the owners, and ultimately the corrupted casino itself. They were far too powerful. They had to go. Bob Marley united Jamaica better than any politician ever has or probably will. He had to go. John Lennon, feared by the status quo and the Nixon administration for communicating a spirit within the political will of millions of working-class Americans had to go. Jimi Hendrix, a freak accident of timing, genius, and social reconstruction, had to go. Hang on. I don't mean that they were assassinated by government forces under conspiratorial circumstances, although there is plenty of questionable evidence and eyewitness accounts there to examine if you are so inclined. But for the sake of the argument, I simply mean that the powers that be just could never allow another generation of earth-moving genius like Hendrix, Lennon, and Marley to reincarnate and render the elite's precious little politicians obsolete. And I don't simply mean that the quality of music has declined, because in a lot of ways it really hasn't. Most people just don't have the opportunity to hear it. Real music is still churning away for the sake of itself at music festivals and clubs. Regardless of any financial jackpot these artists may have been awarded in the past. However, to any music lover paying attention, it's become frustrating and blatantly obvious that true American musicians and musicians across the globe have been marginalized across the airwaves and categorized as non-existent by a monopolized, clear-channel flooded radio industry after the censoring and dumbing down of MTV and the forged oppressive genres of division. Generators like gangster rap, for instance. Grandmaster Flash never wanted his community to fall victim to a crack epidemic. The intent of the original MCs of rap, the forefathers, was to build up communities, not to tear them down. Why would the free market model industry that had existed from the founding of our country, where the heart and soul of genius and human expression determined its popularity and financial success for all parties involved, suddenly be systematically diminished into the evil plastic Illuminati spectacle it has become today? You may say, oh, it's simple, there just aren't musicians around today like there used to be. But that's just a lazy excuse, and impossible to accept for those of us with an unyielding thirst for undeniably badass current music and the full knowledge that every successive American generation of musicians only yearns to push the envelope from the treasure trove of their influences. Great musicians still exist. Great musicians will always exist. Yet we are 2 generations deep now into an American music industry that's been hollowed out and served up cold. Judging from the corporate music industry, it's as if what is regarded as classic rock, blues, or even pop music just stopped being created after Kurt Cobain took it all with him in a blaze of tragedy. Do yourself and I a favor and pause for a moment and apply this monologue to the stalemated success and limited cultural influence of someone or a band truly gifted with musical talent that you listen to, or maybe go find one. What should be common knowledge of current living legends has been overshadowed by the careers of the latest American Idol drivel, or that of the embarrassing show The Voice, where semi-gifted musicians get a paycheck to force-feed so-called musicians onto the general public without an original bone in their body. In fact, the band General Public was better than anything on these milquetoast shows, but I digress. Real musicians aren't generated out of some Los Angeles television studio. They crawl out of the swamps, hollers, and cities of America, encapsulating our shared experience, transcending all of our social ills to bring all Americans together, regardless of politics, race, or even religion, soothing the beast in all of us, medication for the soul. And that is insanely powerful stuff. Lightning in a bottle. Think on that. Experience that. Then join me next week on JonBownePolitix. I'll dig into the peculiar secrets lingering in a corporate dark cave where unseen forces in industry, government, and social control meet to pollute the great American dream. Because unbeknownst to many of us just trying to have a little free time to decompress on the weekends and enjoy our God-given rights after slaving away to pay our bills and the taxes that fuel politicians that seem to actually hate all of us, there have been devilish idle hands at work for over a century. Whether it's quiet weapons for silent wars, the Frankfurt School undermining liberty's beacons of higher learning, Fabian's socialist mainstream media indoctrination, American communism, which unfortunately isn't an oxymoron, or the iron grip of ultra-powerful oil barons, their constructs for social engineering are now fully operational. The sands in the hourglass of this grand human experiment of freedom known as the United States of America are running out. Unbeknownst to the vast majority of Americans, we are guinea pigs in an engineered data collection scheme slowly tightening its grasp as the NSA and Silicon Valley reveal they are one and the same. We have all been robbed while we tossed and turned at night in our beds, while somewhere on a hillside, the force of our culture rots in an American landfill because we are being directed, whether we know it or not, to throw it all away. Is former Vice President Joe Biden for real, or are we all being trolled?
Almost 30 years, the culture, the institutional culture has not changed. And that diminishes the likelihood that other women will come forward knowing what they're going to face.
Biden's to-be-determined presidential campaign platform seems to be based on one message, one that Biden is apparently obsessed with: the rights of women to share their pain from sexual abuse.
When a woman sees a distinguished professor or lawyer subject to that kind of cultural backlash, whether it was Dr. Ford or Professor Hill, saw what they endured, it's understandable that they're reluctant to step forward and tell their own stories of harassment or abuse.
Not the hellstorm on the southern border, or even the socialist drivel from his potential Democratic competition. Biden has come out swinging to protect women from men like himself.
Folks, I realize I get a little too passionate about this sometimes, but we all have an obligation to do nothing less than change the culture in this country. That's just the laws. We change the laws. Change the culture. The culture. You all know what the phrase rule of thumb means? Where it's derived from? In English common law. Not codification, common law. Back in the late 1300s, so many women were dying at the hands of their husbands because they were a chattel, just like the cattle or the sheep, that the court of common law decided they had to do something about the extent of the deaths. So you know what they said? No man has a right to chastise his woman with a rod thicker than the circumference of his thumb. This is English jurisprudential culture, a white man's culture.
It all began with one woman recalling her Creepy Joe moment, who will inevitably become hundreds.
Out of nowhere, I feel Joe Biden put his hands on my shoulders, get up very close to me from behind, lean in, smell my hair, and then plant a slow kiss on the top of my head. That in and of itself might sound like it was innocent and well-intentioned. But in the context of it, as a person that had absolutely no relationship with him afterwards, as a candidate who was preparing to make my case for why I should be elected the second in command of that state, to have the vice president of the United States do that to me so unexpectedly and just kind of out of nowhere, it was just shocking. I felt powerless. I felt like I couldn't move.
And when do the fathers and mothers get their 15 minutes of fame due to Creepy Joe's antics? Any parent will tell you, if someone did this to your kids, they would be lucky if they didn't get their teeth knocked out. But that's how they roll in Washington, D.C., where power supersedes human instinct. But relax. Take your blue pill. Creepy Joe didn't do anything inappropriate. The Chicago Tribune reports former Vice President Joe Biden said Sunday he doesn't believe he ever acted inappropriately toward women, but will listen respectfully to suggestions he did. The Democrats are attempting to pass the media's hot potato.
He's also one who has said in situations like this that the default is to believe the woman, to believe the accuser. Do you believe Lucy Flores?
I have no reason not to believe her.
You know her. Do you believe her? What do you make of this?
I have no reason not to believe Lucy. And I think what this speaks to is the need to fundamentally change the culture of this country.
There's a lot of things I know about Joe Biden. I've known him for a long time. He is extremely affectionate, extremely flirtatious in a completely safe way. I am sure that somebody can misconstrue something he's done.
Creepy Joe Biden, the potential frontrunner, has taken the madness of the left to new heights, where the predator openly grooms its prey, while publicly suffering from a level of hubris not seen since Icarus flew too close to the sun. Jon Bowne reporting. Beto O'Rourke, the Irishman who identifies as Hispanic, unleashed his candidacy for president and celebrated his platform to break the back of America in El Paso, Texas, by keeping the southern borders wide open.
We will find security not through walls, not through militarization. We will find security by focusing on our ports of entry that connect us to the rest of the world, so we have a better idea of who and what is coming in here, and we facilitate the trade and travel connected to millions of jobs around this country.
Meanwhile, Mexico warns that a caravan of over 20,000 Central Americans is heading towards the U.S. border. While, as the Arizona Central reports, U.S. Border Patrol officials in Arizona said they have started releasing migrant families from their custody into the streets of Yuma because processing centers can't cope with the large numbers of arriving families and minors. Additionally, Princeton Policy Advisors researcher Stephen Kopitz projects that in 2019, there will be up to 500,000 illegal aliens at the southern border who successfully cross into the U.S. undetected by Border Patrol agents.
2 weeks ago, I briefed the media and testified in Congress that our immigration system was at the breaking point. That breaking point has arrived this week at our border, and nowhere has that crisis manifested more acutely than here in El Paso. On Monday and Tuesday, CBP started the day with over 12,000 migrants in our custody. As of this morning, that number was 13,400. A high number for us is 4,000. A crisis level is 6,000. 13,000 is unprecedented. The arriving flows are made up primarily of Central American families and unaccompanied children, over 65% of them. These groups cannot be repatriated expeditiously and instead are almost guaranteed to be released to remain in the U.S. indefinitely, regardless of the merits of their immigration or asylum claim. And within that flow are thousands of criminals, smugglers, gang members, and public safety threats that we're sworn to protect this country from. With up to 40% or more of our personnel in key sectors like El Paso working to care for, transport, provide medical and hospital watch for families and children, that means our security posture at the border is negatively impacted. The same criminal organizations that are smuggling migrants, profiting from them, abusing them in the journey, are benefiting from our reduced security presence. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing adults who are trying to evade capture behind those families as we're bogged down with large groups.
As the surge continues to be unmanageable, Trump's warning that the borders will be closed sets up yet another fight with Congress, as another partial government shutdown could begin soon if negotiations continue to stall.
Number one, Congress has to act. And number two, Mexico, they make so much money from the United States and so many other things, so many other assets. They have to grab it and they have to stop it. We have right now 2 big caravans coming up from Guatemala, massive caravans walking right through Mexico. So Mexico's tough. They can stop them, but they chose not to. Now they're going to stop them. And if they don't stop them, we're closing the border. They'll close it, and we'll keep it closed for a long time. I'm not playing games.
The Democrats should be proud of their anti-American intentions. They are still winning the unprecedented United Nations battle to destroy America from within. Jon Bowne reporting.
After reading the Green New Deal, I'm mostly afraid of not being able to get through this speech with a straight face.
The Green New Deal finally landed its impossible $100 trillion tax dollar country-killing behemoth on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Its main sponsor, freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had set the table at a House committee meeting. Flailing around with Beto-esque zeal, AOC passionately pretended to have a grip on the science of climate change.
This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country.
Even Cortez's asthma claims fell short.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Fox Business host Charles Payne cited several studies, including a Columbia University study from 2013 that stated cockroach and mouse allergens are more common in lower-income housing and neighborhoods, as well as a New York Times study from 2003 in which social workers said they encountered furniture and carpets covered in dust in the Bronx and Harlem. These two studies show the likely culprit behind the asthma Cortez was flailing about.
This is a picture of Aquaman, a superhero from the undersea kingdom of Atlantis, and notably here, a founding member of the Super Friends. I draw your attention, Mr. President, to the 20-foot impressive seahorse he's riding. Under the Green New Deal, this is probably Hawaii's best bet. Now, I'm the first to admit that a massive fleet of giant, highly trained seahorses would be cool. It would be really, really awesome. But we have to consider a few things. We have no idea about scalability or domestic capacity in this sector. The last thing we want is to ban all airplanes and only then find out that China or Russia may have already established strategic hippocampus programs designed to cut the United States out of the global market. Mr. President, we must not allow and cannot tolerate a giant seahorse gap.
Every Democratic senator who is currently running for president has embraced the Green New Deal.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell sprung the vote on the reluctant Democrats, some of which, including Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, Doug Jones of Alabama, and Angus King of Maine, sided with the Republicans by voting no, while 43 of the Democrats hid behind procedure by merely voting present, a show of cold feet amongst Senate Democratic presidential candidates with zero guts to back up the madness of Cortez, who blamed McConnell for the resounding defeat in a tweet. In the end, AOC's United Nations Agenda 2030 climate change scheme, known now as the Green New Deal, was voted down with 0 yeas and 57 nays.
You know, we talk about cost. We're going to pay for this whether we pass a Green New Deal or not.
A no vote on the Green New Deal is a vote against a government takeover of our economy that would stifle economic growth, bankrupt our nation, and endanger the prosperity of all Americans. A no vote is a vote in favor of continuing an open and free economy that has made America the richest country in the world. And we find that the best way to do environmental improvement is to use the wealth of a nation to accomplish that goal.
Better luck next time, Cortez, if there is a next time.
1 year ago, I was waitressing in a taco shop in downtown Manhattan.
Jon Bowne reporting. You can always find us at dailynewscollective.com, at blablahshow.com, on YouTube at JonBownePolitix, on gab.ai at JonBownePolitix, and Twitter at NewsBound.